Hello, I'm Jill at engVid, and today we have a lesson on words ending ISM, ISM. Okay, if you speak French or Italian or other Latin-based languages, you probably already know a lot of vocabulary that ends ism. In French, isme, and Italian, ismo. So you will probably know the vocabulary quite well, but in English there's just one little point to make, that you need an extra syllable at the end. So for example, if we say the word optimism, it's optimism. So there's an you have to put an extra little vowel sound in to get the so optimism. I guess in French it would be optimisme, and Italian optimismo, if there is such a word. So you have to say ism. So the extra vowel sound comes between the S and the M. Ism. So that's just the slight difference in English. I've heard people try to say the end of the word without an extra syllable, and it doesn't really sound right. So this is just to clarify that. And also, whatever your native language is, this is just a range of vocabulary of words ending ism, different subject areas. We have some political words, sort of human type words, scientific words, medical words, and so on, all using ism at the end. So let's just go through, and if any of the words are a little bit unusual, I will explain the meaning. Okay. So let's begin. We have optimism and pessimism, which go together. So optimism, if you're optimistic, or pessimistic, so there you have the adjective that comes from it. So optimism is a good thing, although, you know, you need a bit of balance. You have to have some realism as well. Be realistic. So there's a balance there, but optimism means you think, oh, everything's possible, or the idea that, oh, we'll try to do that, we'll give it a try, see if we can, rather than a pessimism. Or if you're pessimistic, you might say, oh no, we'll never be able to do that, there's no point even trying. So that's the difference between them. And then realism is to say, well, we could succeed, we might not, but it's worth a try. So let's see what happens. So that's those three go together really quite well. Okay, and then surrealism. Surrealism means more than real. It's a kind of artistic term to do with, if you see a painting, maybe by an artist like Salvador Dali, and it's all a bit strange. You might have what seem to be solid objects, like a watch, which is sort of bending and curving and sort of draped across something. You know, watches don't do that. So it's some sort of playing around with reality to make things look a bit strange and unusual, disorientating sort of effect. Okay, so that's surrealism, which you get in art, you get it in theatre, in plays, where people behave in a really strange way, which isn't very realistic. It's a bit extreme. So that's surrealism. Okay. Then we have some political isms, different types of politics. Communism, which is often described as left-wing politics, communism, fascism, so it's not fasc, but fascism, which is the more the right-wing politics towards the right, capitalism, systems based on finance, money, buying and selling, all of that. Socialism, a political system based around society and people. Humanism, focusing on humanity. Okay. Pacifism, so although it's spelt with a C, it sounds like an S. Pacifism, people who believe in peace, which hopefully most people do, but some people don't. So unfortunately, pacifism, and people who believe in pacifism who would never want to fight or join the army or whatever. So it's a kind of belief system. Okay. Right. So then the second column, just a mixture of things here. Criticism. Nobody likes criticism unless it's constructive criticism. Sometimes it's a good idea to ask people for feedback on something that you've done because you can learn from it. So we don't tend to like criticism. It depends what kind of criticism it is, whether it's constructive or not, whether it's just, maybe if it's just unkind criticism, it's not very helpful. Okay. And then a scientific word, magnetism. If you have a magnet or two magnets, they might stick together, magnetism. And then a profession, journalism. So ism words, they can cover all sorts of different subjects. Journalism, to do a course in journalism, okay. And professionalism, if you do a job well, you're showing professionalism, okay. Then racism, which is not a good thing, having prejudice against people of a particular nationality or race. So racism, so again, racism, like pacifism, racism. Feminism, more positive, if it's to do with women standing up for their rights and wanting equality and so on. Feminism. Specialism, if you have a specialism, if you're studying, you may have done a first degree, then you want to do a second degree and focus more precisely on one topic and go into more depth with that topic. That would be your specialism. Okay. Then a medical term, metabolism, to do with the body and how the body is balanced in the way the body functions, metabolism. Okay. Rheumatism, an illness of the muscles, rheumatism. And then finally, something we should all avoid if we're studying and writing things. Plagiarism is not a good thing to do. And sometimes if you don't acknowledge all your sources, and if you're using an idea and you're not saying this idea was developed by a certain person and who published something about it, if you don't acknowledge your sources, or if you look on the internet for information and copy it and don't acknowledge the source, and you make it look as if you've written it rather than somebody else who wrote it originally, that's plagiarism. So plagiarism, so that's to be avoided. And if you're on a course and if you know, if somebody is found to be plagiarizing, they can get into trouble for that. So it's something to avoid. Okay, so I hope that's been some useful vocabulary for you, and also to be aware of the extra syllable that you need at the end. ISM, like that. Okay, so what I'll do just to end is to run through all of these words again, just so that you can hear them and how they're pronounced. Okay, so here we go. Optimism, pessimism, realism, surrealism, communism, fascism, capitalism, socialism, humanism, pacifism, criticism, magnetism, journalism, professionalism, racism, feminism, specialism, metabolism, rheumatism, plagiarism. Okay, right, so if you'd like to do a quiz on this subject, just go to the website engvid.com and try the quiz. And I hope it's been a useful session for you. Thank you for watching, and see you again soon. Bye for now.